Hello and welcome to the Autistic Me podcast. I am Christopher Scott Wyatt, speaking as the Autistic Me. Today we have a special guest on the podcast. We have Jennifer Jordan, the founder of Unabridged Press. Unabridged Press is seeking to help individuals with disabilities enter the employment market and find constructive ways to use media to advocate for themselves and others. So, Jennifer, would you like to tell us a little bit about what Unabridged Press is from your point of view and how it fits into the disability community?
Yeah, sure. So Unabridged Press was based on, of course, the idea of a book being unabridged is you get the full story of a picture of a story, and in this case, society. I don't think we hear a lot about certain voices, and certainly growing up, I knew very little about the disability community. I can't even think of knowing anybody who was disabled that I was aware of growing up. And so I stumbled into this field. I have this parallel career as a caregiver with people with disabilities. And I just, loved the personalities and the discovery of the people I was meeting, people with intellectual disabilities like Down syndrome and other diagnoses. And I felt very akin to these folks, like these were my people. For a long time, I thought, well, how can I get some of these stories out there so people experience what I'm experiencing? That people understand this group. Because I would tell people, oh, we're cooking and we're doing different things. I think a lot of times when we say disability or disabled, like people assume that means completely disabled, like cannot function in any way. It's just such an umbrella term. So anyway, I wanted to do something like this with the folks I was working with, but there are HIPAA rules, there are privacy rules. You can't go into somebody's group home and start recording them, especially when you have a job as their caregiver. So it really came out of one woman who I've worked with a lot, Erin Gannon, she has Down syndrome, approached me at one point and said, I heard you were on the radio and I want to do that. And I was thrilled because I was like, well, this perfectly fits into what I've wanted to do. She worked really hard. We went to some podcasting conferences and I met a couple other people along the way. Mark Steidel, who has cerebral palsy, he wanted to participate. So I started working with the two of them.
One of the things that is overlooked is the in our own voices philosophy. Often we have allies and groups that want to increase awareness, but the thing that is missing from those conversations are the voices of the individuals with the disabilities. And I think that by stepping aside and giving over the microphone to other individuals really is the ultimate form of being an ally.
And it's, I'll admit it's been like hard for me at some points to step away from that because I've been used to having a byline and being a host of a radio show. I hosted the Allegheny Front, which is about environmental issues on WESA for a long time. And, some people I worked with professionally, at the beginning, I was in some videos with Erin and in audio with Mark, and they wanted me to be there, I think, so that they felt secure and comfortable and they had a fallback. Professional friends in the media were like, no, you cannot be on there. Like, it's much more compelling if you're not on there, like this is not your stage anymore. and it is better, and when I told Erin and Mark, they got that, they were like, yeah, we're ready to be the sole interviewer. So that's been a cool evolution.
I know that when I launched the Autistic Me podcast, my goal was to have other voices speaking as the autistic individual of that week or that episode. And it has been difficult in some ways for reasons that I can understand and appreciate, but they also frustrate me. In particular, we have individuals who say that I have this story and I want to share it, and they will come and we will record either in person or via a computer session like this one. And after we record and everything's ready to go, I'll get an email saying, you know what, I don't think I want to have that aired. I don't want to be about my disability, or I don't want to disclose to workers or friends and family, especially cognitive disabilities or mental health issues. So what happens is there's a fear factor of making the disability something that you air publicly and discuss publicly. And that's a little bit frustrating for me when I believe we have many issues that need to be addressed. And the only way to address them is if those of us who are in the disabled community stand up and say, I have these needs. Here is why I have these needs. And can we please address them? Once people are afraid to do that, it's very hard to make progress.
Yeah. And I didn't have that concern about the folks I've worked with, Erin and Mark, because they're adults. Erin is in her 40s. She's close to my age. She's, well into adulthood. But I had a fear more of, I still sometimes have it, like, of their parents, reactions. I think somewhere along the way, somebody said to me, like, well, will people be able to comment on Erin's performance, on her, performance as an interviewer on Facebook? And I was like, well, yeah, and there's a fear that people will say mean things because she's putting herself out there. I think I'm getting off on a little bit of a tangent from what you're talking about, because this is good for me to know what you're talking about, because that isn't something I've thought about a whole lot of for other people. But yeah, certainly for myself, I mean, I have some issues with anxiety and depression that I haven't talked about really much publicly at all. I'm aware that I'm doing it right now because of job security.
When you're talking with disability community members, a great many of us go through those periods where we have either mental health or cognitive issues, and it seems somehow easier to discriminate against individuals who are vulnerable. If you're in a wheelchair, people can understand, okay, you need a ramp and we need to hold the elevator for you. But if you seem to be cognitively different or neurodiverse or have a mental health issue, this somehow seems to scare people a little more. And the idea that you want to take a microphone or a camera and then comment on it, it can make people uncomfortable. And I find it fascinating that you've been able to have individuals come to you and say, we want to do this.
Wow. Now that you put it this way, I feel like it's a real honor and a privilege that they came to me. And it's really changed my life. I mean, I feel like it's like the trajectory I want to stay on for the rest of my life, whereas when I was reporting on the environment, I was like, yeah, this is extremely important, but it didn't quite feel like the fulfillment of me. Whereas I feel like it's just so exciting that I have an opportunity to be that connector between, a lot of the contacts I've been able to make over the years and people like Erin who, wouldn't have had that opportunity, but she saw for herself that what she wanted, and asked for it.
Now, the individuals you've worked with have won awards. They have produced shows that have a large audience. And how has that been received by those individuals and their families and their support networks? How has the success been received?
Very well, I would just say overall, but I would say in various ways. And for example, Erin works at Achieva. She has worked at Achieva for a long time, a big disability service provider. After she worked on this for about a year or so, they actually hired her in their marketing and communications department part-time. So, I was able to give her some skills that could give her a new job. And she's so excited about that, and she liked her old job, which was working with children she didn't work directly with children, but she worked in a early intervention program for parents would bring in kids that have Down syndrome or other disabilities. But it's another new opportunity for her, because what I see with employment with a lot of people I've worked with intellectual disabilities, they have the same job. Like, once they get a job, they have it like forever. That's oftentimes the only job they have. There's not upward mobility. There's not change. On some level, that's kind of depressing, to know that things are always going to be the same.
You want to open up career opportunities. You are planning to do this through a number of initiatives, including training seminars. Why don't you explain how you see Unabridged Press expanding beyond these initial individuals you've worked with to a larger community of eventual media producers, content producers from the disabled communities?
One of the ways that I'm personally, when Unabridged Press really makes money now, is working for clients in the nonprofit sector, although it doesn't necessarily have to be the nonprofit sector. As you know, media is shifting so much. Newspapers are, what do we have? The Post Gazette is down to like 4 days a week, or no, I'm sorry, five days a week, I think, of delivery or publication, rather, print publication. So everything is shifting so quickly, and yet, you have these organizations like community living and support services. All the organizations are on social media. They're producing their own media. So there's a big opportunity there, I believe, for people who are being served by these organizations like Achieva to have a role in producing content for them. So that's, I think, one employment opportunity, like basically like Aaron, the path Aaron has taken. But I think, with the skills we gain with media and what you're doing with podcasting, I think it's very transferable, not just to a podcast, but to, in lots of ways. The skills of communication and listening are very important in any job that you're in. Pretty much. I mean, I suppose there are jobs that it's not important in. But yes, so we have the workshops coming up too. And that is, partially to, like I said, give people a skill that they can walk away with, a comfort level with interviewing. Maybe they want to record their family. That's a role that anyone can take on. Like I, for example, right now have an aunt who has cancer. And so I'm taking a day a week to record a series of her life stories. So that's something you can do, casually or for your church or that kind of thing. Or you could do that, I think, professionally. My dream is, like, long term, is to employ people within a few years. I mentioned that I was on this program, the Allegheny Front, and I think in that model all the time, because the woman who started that, it was just one person who started a small 15-minute radio program where she had a calendar of environmental events. And now over the years, I mean, it's taken 20 some years. There are 3 or 4 employees. They're now doing a national environmental podcast. So I'd really like to build an organization that has this focus on disabilities.
The media landscape shifting so much has caused difficulties in terms of reaching audiences. Obviously, with the number of podcasts and the number of blogs. So one of the things that I have struggled with is this shifting landscape from what was a 500,000 hit blog to the podcast, and increasing pressure to consider YouTube and video. As you mentioned, we are going from print to blogs, which was basically print in an online format, then to podcast, and now we're shifting strongly towards video, where every media site has to have video production. When you see the skills that you want to impart to individuals in the disability communities, it sounds like you see these as new media skills and new media marketing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned imparting skills to the disabled community, but I also know that people in the disability community have skills that I need, right? Like, I'm super interested in what Arts for Autism and the Joey Travolta Film Camp are doing, and what students there are learning, and how I might be able to bring together, say Aaron, who's interested in doing video, and somebody who's great at filming or editing video.
I would definitely like to see more cross-pollination of the programs we have. We are in the Pittsburgh region, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and there are a number of good film programs at local colleges, including a fantastic program at the Community College of Allegheny County. And we also then have Arts for Autism in the Joey Travolta Film Camp in the summers. We have a wonderful media program at Chatham University, and we have others emerging. I am currently teaching on a one-year contract at Slippery Rock, which is expanding its communications facilities. So we have this network within southwestern Pennsylvania, but it isn't connected well. And one of the things I would love to see is students who attend Point Park working with students over at Chatham, and students who go to the Joey Travolta Film Camp as middle school or high school students, finding supports maybe through CCAC or Slippery Rock University or one of the other Pennsylvania system campuses. We don't seem to do a good job, though, of explaining to students with disabilities that you can take classes at these institutions or within these programs and continue to grow beyond something like the film camp. And I think continuous training, as you know, in the media, continuous training is essential because the technologies and the methods and even the audiences are changing rapidly.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Point Park because that is where the workshops are taking place at the Center for Media Innovation on Wood Street, which is a really beautiful space. And I'm really glad for Point Park's support in helping grow this opportunity. You know, I mean, I went to them. I'm not a staff member. I'm somebody who knew the director of the Center for Media Innovation. And I said, I have these people I'm working with and some of them have disabilities and they want to try media. And he's like, bring them over. And then the next step was like, hey, I need funding for this. So, they worked with me to raise money from the FISA Foundation to open these workshops for people who want to gain the same opportunities as Aaron and Mark.
And you hope to make this an ongoing, regular event, these workshops, which will be in the Pittsburgh region, and you hope to make these an ongoing regional workshop series, is my understanding.
Yes, and a good bit of the focus of what I hope that people will be interested in kind of reporting on would be leading up to the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act next year. So, things having to do with inclusion and education, in employment, public safety. I recently saw that the Pittsburgh police have a new bloodhound that in the canine unit that will find people with various cognitive impairments who wander. What they specifically said was some people who have autism, some people have Alzheimer's, various things. And this bloodhound, I assume he's very low key because his name is actually Loki, Loki. So that's like the kind of person I'd love to get that police officer who works with this dog, on for someone to interview. That's a lighter kind of topic, but it's not light if you're lost. I think it's good for people to know that this is a public service that's out there.
How do you see the individuals that you've done training with so far and hope to do training in the future? How do you see this becoming a network? Do you see it as a series of podcasting and video channels? Do you see this as something Unabridged Press?
I would like for a lot of it to be on Unabridged Press, like the kind of back end of what I do, which is marketing services. That can go anywhere, a podcast for an organization. I mean, I haven't talked to Achieva, so, but like something like an Achieva, they could have a podcast that is produced in part by folks that I'm hopefully bringing on through the workshops.
Podcasting depends on being found. It depends on listeners rating your show. It depends on people sharing it on Facebook or Twitter. It depends very much on building media savvy. And that's something that a lot of us, that's not our primary interest. We don't always understand that we have to do that. It's certainly not one of the more enjoyable tasks if that's not your interest. And I think as part of any workshops and training, it's really important to sit down and ask people, okay, you're going to record this video or audio. How are you going to find an audience? And you mentioned that that's some of your experiences, obviously working in public broadcasting.
Well, and I'll tell you what, keep mentioning Erin, but she's taught me a lot. I covered the environment. I have a very kind of public service focus. So I never really looked, and in fact, I kind of looked down on people who would interview celebrities, But Erin, at one point, we have a video where she interviews the Pittsburgh. Well, he was a Pittsburgh Pirate. Neil Walker. He's a second baseman. One point, she met him at a family wedding, and she invited him on the show. And the next thing I know, she's saying, Neil Walker's going to be our next guest. And I was like, what? What does he have to do with disability? And she said, oh, well, he helped with Miracle League, which is a special needs baseball program. And I'm like, well, that's wonderful. I mean, like she got a celebrity, who has a connection, and I think people do like celebrities and they like to see that. So she definitely has an eye for that, or I like a knack, a media savvy, about what people will watch. That's something I've kind of learned from her, actually.
I definitely think that that's important to marketing media online is the celebrity cachet that unfortunately becomes so essential to attracting hits and clicks. It's a shame. And one of the things this does, at least in the autism community, is we have our own network of celebrities that people then seek out to interview. Because if you can have those authors, those individuals who are known beyond the autism community, you can get listeners because, oh, well, you have these celebrity autism guests. And so far, that's something I have avoided. But I do know that that's something that people ask me is, well, why haven't you interviewed some of these published authors who are autistic? And there's that part of me that resists the inspiration league. And there are certain names, especially in the disabled communities, that just attract attention because they are on tour and they've appeared places and they've had movies made about them, or they've written, best-selling books. And there's that part of me that says, yes, that's nice, but everyone knows their story and I want to tell other stories. So it's a catch-22 of wanting to build an audience and wanting to build a network, and at the same time wanting to keep fresh with new voices that haven't been heard. You mentioned bringing in a Neil Walker or any other local celebrity, especially a sports celebrity in Pittsburgh, is certainly going to get you listeners. That's a very difficult thing for me to consider because I don't see how that doesn't overshadow the individuals that I want to highlight, which are the individuals living the experience. I hope that as you move forward with these workshops, that we are able to create a supportive network of individuals who look forward to creating media and having it out there and having their voices heard, and not relying on gimmicks or celebrities to pull in the audience. At the same time, I certainly do understand that these two go hand in hand. You have to build an audience to have your voice heard.
Right. I would love to see, I guess, a balance. I would love to see, celebrities who would like to come on and share their experience, particularly if they do have a valid connection with people with disabilities. Like I said, Neil Walker had this experience with Miracle League, which I thought was a good fit in another episode. And by the way, I'm using the word podcasting more loosely because we have some videos and I sort of include them in the conversation about podcasts. The one that's been the most popular that we've recently done, and I think it's really good, is, I don't know if you saw it, we call it a dashboard jam episode so that we don't completely steal the words carpool karaoke from this late night program. Erin is very interested in music and dance, and we had on Billy Hartung, who heads Center for Theater Arts, and they have a special actors program there. And so he talked about that a little bit, and he also has a child with Down syndrome who's, I think, a 2-year-old. They talked about that as well. And I thought that was a really delightful conversation, and a piece where, I don't know, it was really cool because my dad watched it with me, and he had never really understood my work with people with disabilities. And he cried because he didn't know what fun Erin was. He didn't know how capable she was, really, is what it was. I don't think knew people with Down syndrome maybe could read. Billy Hartung, he's a local celebrity, but he definitely has such a valid, thorough interest in what we're doing.
As you expand Unabridged Press, which right now is just yourself, as you expand it and build this network and hope to employ people, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years with the Unabridged Press projects?
I would love to have a cafe, like a meeting space. I've had this dream of that I call Pod Cafe, where people can come in and record their stories. So it's a little bit of media and a little bit of socialization. Well, a lot of socialization and media encompassed in that. And there can be storytelling events. I went to cooking school, so this is a long-term dream that like marries all of my interests. And I should say, when you said Unabridged Press is just me, it is mostly at this point. I mean, I'm the only person on the LLC documents, but I'm really excited that Erin got her first paycheck from a recent grant we got, so that this is starting to emerge as a paid opportunity. Not just something that Erin's doing for fun or that I'm doing for fun completely, even though it is fun, and I think it always should be, or should be most of the time. Let's see. Another thing is I would like to figure out how to divide the shares of Unabridged Press so that it is, I don't know if I'd say cooperatively owned, but so, people like Erin and Mark who have been here from the beginning, theoretically, if it becomes a profitable company, would share in that.
If people are interested in Unabridged Press and the upcoming workshops, where should they go online to learn more? And how would they go about getting in contact with you regarding these future opportunities?
The website is unabridgedpress.com. It's unabridged, UNABRIDGED press.com. My email is jennifer@unabridgedpress.com. And the media workshops are listed on the front page of the site. It says new media workshops open for people with disabilities. And there is a link to apply for the workshops on that page. We are asking for $75 for the 2 sessions of the workshop, but we do have funding if people are not able to afford that.
And do you hope to eventually be able to do this beyond the Pittsburgh region?
Wouldn't that be great? Yes, let's do it. Yeah, I wouldn't it be cool if we did online classes and master class type things that you see in a lot of places? I think that would be great. Yeah, there's another, sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I would recommend that people who are interested in this kind of thing, I've been a little bit connected with something called, you're probably familiar with it, the National Center on Disability Journalism, which is based at the Arizona State University Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. They had a wonderful conference in October in Washington, D.C., and they had a Disability Journalism Award ceremony. They had like a large market award and a smaller market award. NPR's Joe Shapiro won for reporting on sexual assault of people with intellectual disabilities, which is 7 times higher than the normal rate. And then, there was a guy who did some really great work, who is a wheelchair user, and he was finding that his wheelchair was getting broken in on airplane flights. So he did an investigation of that. So it was great. Judy Woodruff from PBS was the MC. So it was like this really all-star kind of evening, but a very small group, but very impressive journalists and impressive stories in the room. So I would just urge people who are interested in this to look them up, to the National Center on Disability and Journalism.
I would really like to see some of the other organizations that Achieva would be affiliated with. Achieva, for those unfamiliar, is a group that is associated with ARC, which has been slowly changing its identity. And I know that the ARC organizations nationally serve individuals with Down syndrome and other disabilities. And they do a wonderful job of supporting job training nationally throughout the United States. My wife and I have worked with ARC Midstate in Minnesota, and I've also worked with ARC organizations in Florida and Texas. And I do believe that there is an opportunity here that would embrace individuals with those disabilities that we too often assume are life limiting. And I don't believe they are life limiting if we can find ways to highlight the skills and interests of the individual instead of seeing just the disability.
I am frequently just so impressed by people who I've worked with who have intellectual disabilities. Their depth in so many ways. You were asking about other things I would like to do. For one thing, I'm Catholic, and a lot of the people I work with at Emmaus are Catholic, and I've seen that the Catholic Church has some resources for children who have intellectual disabilities, but once people get older, there's really nothing that I can find. I think it would be really cool if we had some like an ongoing podcast that was about spirituality. That I just it's fascinating to me when one of our residents' fathers died recently. People said to me, "Well, was she upset? Does she understand what's happening?" And I was like, "Yes, she totally does." People just, I don't think, see a need for spiritual development in people with intellectual disabilities, and I think that's a real shame because they've taught me a lot about love and faith and community.
I certainly could see some podcast episodes that address the accessibility of organizations, including religious organizations. One of the complaints that I have received from parents of children with disabilities is that places of worship don't always embrace the needs to have special spaces for those children, especially those with sensory issues, sensory processing issues. Some of them have, whether it's physical or verbal tics that disrupt services. So there are needs for accommodations in these places of worship that are not always understood or embraced by the leadership of these faith-based organizations and churches. And I think that would be a wonderful topic to explore on a podcast. I hope that these are highlighted by individuals interested in podcasting or video blogging. I think that these are wonderful topics. I look forward to working with Unabridged Press in the future.
I'm so excited that we got connected and that you're going to help mentor some folks at an upcoming workshop.
I know that I consider it one of the almost obligations that I have as someone who is able to adapt to technology very well. I may not have the same flexibility as some people. I don't work well with a mouse. Listeners to this podcast and readers of my blog know that I'm partially paralyzed. I have found that mixing boards with levers work beautifully, that adaptive technology works very well for me. I can put a video camera on a tripod. I don't have to try to balance it with a gimbal or anything like that. There are so many wonderful technologies available now that I feel like since I can use them, I almost have an obligation to show parents and educators and individuals with disabilities all of the things we can do collaboratively now with technologies that give the disabled individual equal access to the media and equal access to public discourse and equal opportunity to participate in civic discussions like ADA and other legislative and regulatory mandates that will improve our lives. We can now participate in those debates and have a voice, but we have to have someone show us, here's what can be done with the technology. Here's what can be done with the media. Because if you don't know that, you just let yourself feel isolated and alone and powerless, and you let other people speak for you.
Right. And I would say, too, that, unfortunately, it is the case with most of the people in, say, the caregiving profession. The job I have as a caregiver, I only need a high school education. So there are, I come from a different background, but there are a lot of people in this field who aren't savvy in technology. So they're not going to be able to pass that information on, right, to people who have disabilities who rely on them for information. And you referred to something. I mean, I see so much about how Pennsylvania and other states are, integrating people with disabilities into the workforce. The days of what did they call them? Workshops and sub-minimum wage workshops, right? Where people were not doing work that, I mean, it's, I think it was satisfying work to some people, but there are a lot of people who could do a lot more. And of course, nobody really wants to make less than minimum wage. So those, of course, are closing if they're not already completely closed. And there is a drive for more people to be integrated in, for more workplaces to be inclusive and integrated. And so it also needs to be the case that folks have an outlet for their voice and their perspective and their welfare.
I appreciate your time tonight. This is, I think, an exciting time thanks to technology and thanks to the emergence of digital media. I hope that we are able to, in the future, talk to some of the individuals that we will be working with as they produce content. I think having their voices added to the conversation on this podcast and other places allows us to create this network that I envision where people say, wow, I heard this disability podcast. Now I want to go listen to this other one because I heard these voices cross-pollinating. And I think that's so valuable. And I do hear that on a lot of podcasts that I listen to where they will cross record episodes in education, and you say, wow, here's this education specialist who's talking about her unique gamification or her unique use of technology. Now I will go listen to her podcast. So as podcasters and video bloggers interview each other, I think we feed this positive energy that we need.
Yeah, thank you so much for what you're doing. I really love listening to your podcast.
I certainly don't know that they're always uplifting, but I hope that they're honest and present a point of view that's valuable to parents and individuals with disabilities and hopefully educators.
They're extremely informative.
Thank you. I am very concerned with the fact that people make a lot of assumptions when they see me with a cane or they notice that I will have palsy episodes. I want them to understand that I can still be productive and produce something of value. And I think that my own experiences as I'm now in my 50s has been shaped by a generation ago. And hopefully many of these things are now changing as education has improved, regulation has improved. I'm hoping that the future generations never feel like they are shut out of the public conversations. I thank you for your time. We've been talking to Jennifer Jordan. She is the founder of Unabridged Press. You can find that online at unabridgedpress.com. And coming up, Unabridged Press will be conducting workshops on media production for individuals with disabilities. Jennifer, if you would like to give us the information again for Unabridged Press and how people can learn more information about the upcoming workshops in the Pittsburgh area.
Sure. Unabridgedpress.com is UNABRIDGED press, PRESS.com. And you can find the information about the workshops there. You can find other work that we do. We're also on Facebook at Unabridged Press and Twitter as well. The workshops coming up, very exciting. The first one will be 2 sessions, March 23rd and April 6th. And we're looking at an older group for that, about 21 and up. We'll be introducing people to learn how to interview, start with those softball questions perhaps and work your way up. And we're really going to focus on topics that are important, that influence the lives of people with disabilities, about inclusion and education in the workplace. And is there anything I missed? How can they reach me, perhaps? Jennifer, 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 at unabridgedpress.com is my email.
And you are going to do these workshops, you said, in March and April.
Mm-hmm.
And you hope to do some more in the future.
Yes, the summer. I'm thinking June will probably be the next one. And if somebody wanted to just sign up now for one that's coming up in the future, that's fine too. The link is on the web article, the link to the Google Form application.
And before we go, I do want to mention one thing. The individuals you have worked with have won awards. And if my audience wanted to pursue that media, look at it, and come to appreciate what is being accomplished, how can they find those interviews that are available now?
The audio that we do is all on SoundCloud.com. There's an Unabridged Press page, and then, like I said, a lot of it's on Facebook and Twitter and the website as well.
That's wonderful. So if they go to unabridged.com, they can see some of the work already being produced by individuals trained by yourself. And in the future, you hope to add more voices to Unabridged Press.
Yes, unabridgedpress.com. Yes, absolutely.
That's exciting news, and I look forward to working with you in the future. This has been Christopher Scott Wyatt speaking as the Autistic Me. And again, my thanks to Jennifer Jordan.
Thank you.